the slides. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, but you're more than welcome to grab. Yeah, we just brought some, but yeah, I don't think there's going to be a actual handout from the speaker. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope that each of you had a wonderful time of fellowship, food, desserts, and to be able to come back here this afternoon for the seminar. As you can see on the flyer that we have been passing out for the last few weeks, Pastor Ted Levterov will be speaking on the subject of searching for your identity, a short history of Seventh-day Adventism. And so with not spent, yes.
Okay, we have a sign-in sheet.
Okay.
You can pass around, please sign.
All right.
And I also have the flyers for.
Okay. All right. So Cindy's going to be coming around for a sign up, especially for those who are have signed up for your Master Guide training along with honors. We need your information. Also, for today's seminar, Pastor Levterov is gracious enough to share his PowerPoint slide, which he has already shared with our media ministry. And so we will be able to email that to you. So for those of you who have come from other churches, we have folks from Loma Linda as well. So make sure that we get your contact info so that we can send that PowerPoint slides over to you as well. So let's have a prayer, and then we're going to give the time over right away to Dr. Levterov. Heavenly Father God, we thank you so much for the powerful worship service that we were able to have, reminding us that in everything that we do, we need to give glory to you. And in order for us to do that, we need Jesus in our hearts and also in our lives, in our church, in everything that we do with the Adventist movement until Jesus comes. Lord, we thank you so much for the time of fellowship. And Lord, as we enter into the afternoon portion of the Adventist Heritage Sabbath, that Lord, may you bless us all through the speaker, Dr. Theodore Levterov, and also his family. We thank you so much for his ministry. We thank you so much for his passion. And we thank you so much for everything that he does, not only blessing the students and all around the world, but here even in our local church in Hemet, that he was gracious to come and to bless us all. Lord, we also want to welcome those who have joined us online. And Lord, may we embark upon a journey, adventure this afternoon, getting excited about the history of Adventism. In Jesus Christ we pray, amen. Dr. Levterov?
No, no, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Back up. Here. Okay. Uh, we can take it down a little bit. All right. I meant to be down there, but what do you do after a good potluck on Sabbath? You see, we have a good Adventist tradition, but we're gonna skip it, okay? So if I see you that you guys are sleeping, we're gonna do some exercising. And, I'm gonna ask you to stand up and, we will try to do it as quickly as possible. And it's a challenge because what we are going to try to do in 2 hours, I usually take 10 weeks with students, okay? So we are only going to pinpoint few things, and hopefully this outline will prompt you to go and read some more of the resources that we have, and really make you more interested in Adventist history. Because it's always good to know who you are, isn't it? That's why I put a title, Searching for Your Identity. I mean, why are you Seventh-day Adventists, right? And we need to know who we are, and it happens once you know your history, because that gives you kind of identity, isn't it? Now, I told you I'm Bulgarian, right? And I'm a proud Bulgarian, because I know our history. It's one of the oldest countries in Europe. It was a huge country until they started, cutting a lot of our land, and now we are like 7 million. But we are few, but really quality men and women, okay? So, but I'm joking, but you see the point, right? We need to know our identity. And give me some reasons why is this important, why it's important to know your identity, who you are. Or another question, I'll give you 2 questions, okay? So you guys can not sleep but talk. Why do you need to know the Adventist history? Come on, speak to me. Huh?
You know where you've been and you know where you're going.
You know where you've been, where you're going. Very good. Anyone else? I don't want to do worship, but you remember what Paul says, 1 Corinthians chapter 13, or 10, verse 13. All these things happen as examples. You remember that? And he describes how they went through the Red Sea and all these miracles. And Paul says, man, this is God. But you see, he's going back and says, this is an example for us. Right? So once we know that, we can learn lessons. We know who we are. We learn also lessons, and we are much more effective. I mean, we are grounded of why we are Seventh-day Adventists. So what I'm planning to do, we'll go through, I know it's kind of a training session, okay? So we'll cover some of the things that are on your list, and the rest you are going to read, all right, on your own. But I want you to give you the big picture, all right? So I want you to see the forest, like the whole thing. So we are going to do a chronological walk from 1840s, when Adventism started. There were no Seventh-day Adventists at that time, okay? You will see we're going to start from 1840s and walk until our time. And we're going to pinpoint several really important events that happened that kind of shaped who we are. If you have questions, I mean, you can stop me as I speak, and I will try to have a few questions at the end as well, okay? As I said, that's an impossible task to cover everything, but we'll try to cover as much as we can. Let's see. I like to begin with this quote. It's by Ellen White, but it really describes, the things that I began with. She says, in reviewing our past history, I can say, praise God, as I see what the Lord has wrought, I am filled with astonishment and with confidence in Christ as leader. We have nothing to fear for the future, except as we shall forget the way the Lord has led us and His teaching in our past history. Isn't that great? I mean, I don't know about you, but in my family, I'm really the scary cat. I mean, I fear about everything. And my wife is this one that calms me down. Hey, you're pastor, you need to pray. God will, but I'm always scared about things. And sometimes she reminds me, hey, listen, just look back. Look, you remember what God did? And I'm like, oh, yeah. And I'm coming to a point when I'm inside I'm scared, but I'm afraid to say it because she's going to, you see what I mean? And Ellen White says, listen, we have nothing to fear. Whatever happens, just look back. And I'm sure that if I ask each one of you, you're going to tell me, hey, Pastor, I have this point in my life, and this happened, and wow, amazing things. I remember, I have to tell you this because she reminded me of that a few days ago. When we had to move, I was pastoring in Dallas, and when we had to move here to California, we chose a house, but we had to do a down payment, okay? And I remember that it was Tuesday, the deadline was Tuesday. And by the Saturday, before the Tuesday, we did not have a buyer for our old house in Texas. So we are sitting with my brother and my sister-in-law and my wife, having lunch on Sabbath, and I'm doubting God, as usual, okay? And I'm talking to the table, and my sister-in-law looks at me and says, you have to have faith. And I'm like, what faith? I prayed so much. After all, I'm the pastor, and Tuesday it's coming and nothing. Literally, as I'm speaking these words, there's a text message on my phone. Now, our realtor knew that we are Seventh-day Adventists, so the text message said, I know it's your Sabbath, but call me after sunset. Now, I'm not saying anything to my sister-in-law, to my brother. Just after sunset, I called the guy outside of the house, and he says, we have a buyer, and they're willing to pay cash for you Monday, but you need to leave the house in 2 weeks. And I'm like, I'm ready to leave the house in 2 hours. Monday we had they pay cash, these people. There's some rich people in this country, And I was able to send it. And so my wife's like, look back. And Ellen White says, listen, there's nothing to fear. So that's why history is so exciting. People think, even some of my students, oh man, it's so boring. But history is your story. It's a story. And we all like stories. Have you noticed? We are preaching, pastor, right? We preach and people are kind of looking at their phones and sleeping. And once you begin a story, everybody's like, you see? So that's why history it's exciting. So let's begin. As I said, we're going to pinpoint some major things. And we begin with the very beginning, our roots, which came from the Millerite Adventists, okay? And as the pastor said, I'm going to share the PowerPoint, so at least you will have some things that you can work on later on and study. Now, there's always a context, and the Seventh-day Adventists also appeared in a particular context, and it was 19th century. Now, the question is, why context is important? You see, I'm a teacher, so you have to speak. Why do you think context is important? To know what? Yeah, you understand things. Yeah, sorry? Exactly. You understand things better. When I was accepted to do my PhD at Andrews University, long time ago, so I'm getting old, okay? I got so excited, and I decided to Google a little bit and learn about the American history. You guys are strange people in this country. You know that. So I decided to Google, and I'm Googling, and I'm getting really excited because I read, and I remember I went to my dad, I read that in this country you have National Football League. And I love football. I'm talking about the real one, where you play with a ball, foot, and ball, Not this egg and whatever they do. I still cannot figure it out. And all my students know they're getting a test, and half of it's about soccer, especially if it's about Liverpool, I get up tomorrow morning, 4 o'clock, to watch Liverpool. My wife still cannot figure it out after 20 years of marriage. She's like, why don't you record it? She doesn't get it. Liverpool, we have to watch it live. It's connected to your identity, So, but I'm reading and I'm getting excited talking about context. And I come here and I notice that what you mean by football is not what I thought it was, right? So in order to understand Adventism, you need to know the context. So we know things better. We understand them. Some people read Ellen White and they have issues with Ellen White, and you go and they Google. They don't get this. You need to know football and soccer. That's why you don't get it. So it was during the time of the Second Great Awakening. People were interested in Christianity. In fact, a lot of people from Europe came here because they wanted to have freedom. Religious freedom, yes. That's why they came. Even they went out, they wanted to create a country where, it was as perfect as heaven. I don't want to disappoint you that you guys failed, but, miserably. But that was the context, all right? And within that context, you have people that began to talk about the soon return of Jesus. Most Christians at that time believed that United States will be this new Jerusalem, okay? 1,000 years of, even today some people believe that, 1,000 years of happiness and then Jesus would come and blah, blah, blah. And Millerism, through William Miller, right, you know this gentleman, right? He began to say, no, we need God to fix us. We cannot fix ourselves. You see? So that is the context. So in that context, so people are interested in faith. It's not like, we have to pursue it. That's why Millerism became so popular, because people are just excited to learn something new. And it began with William Miller. Let me say a few things about it, since you have it in the list, and you need to know who William Miller is. You cannot be a Seventh-day Adventist without knowing Father Miller, as they call it. I have a whole sermon about Miller. He's a fascinating figure. He was born, and you see the dates there, but the family moved, they bought a huge farm in Lowhampton, and he had to work on the farm. A little bit like my grandmother, talking about context, right? My grandmother, there were 9 kids, and she was the oldest, and Miller was the oldest, so she finished her 3rd grade, and afterwards her parents said, no more school, you have to work in the farm. So the same thing happened here with Miller, but Miller was very interested in reading, in learning. And he describes that if he heard anybody from the neighbors had a book, he will get it and read it. Okay? And when the time came to marry, because he saw this beautiful lady, Lucy Smith, okay? His life, he says, changed completely. When you marry, your life changes, you know that? You think you're the boss, and suddenly now you're not the boss. All right? So once I joke with my wife, I go and I go in the garage with my car, and she's asking me to do something, and I'm like, Dia, don't you know that I'm the director of the White Estate at Loma Linda? And she said, you're the director of the White Estate before you enter the garage, So, so Miller marries, and his life changed because he moved to a bigger town, to a bigger city, Pulteney, Vermont. And guess what? In that city, they had a huge library. And Miller said, wow, God is so good. So he would spend a lot of time in the library, and he worked as a lieutenant and so forth, but he spent a lot of his time in the library, and in the library there were some people that were talking about God, but they were deists. You know what deism is? People who believe that there is God, but he is not really a personal God. He kind of created us and left us. All right? That's the simplest. So Miller meets with these people and says, man, there's logic about them. Now remember, he grew up in a Christian home. His mom was very devoted Christian, but Miller meets these people, and these people are saying, look, God cannot be personal because we cannot experience so much pain if God is really real and personal. I said, he was a very logical man. And the whole of Adventism, this, as I said this morning, there's logic in that. Okay? So Miller is with that's, by the way, the photos that we have of them, a little bit, with color, Miller and Lucy Smith. So he became a deist until the war that came in 1812 between England and the new nation. All right? So Miller is employed, and he has a little group of soldiers with him. Okay? And as he is there at the war, he begins to reevaluate his life. There are some moments in your life that are so significant that you begin to reevaluate your life. Isn't it true? When I was 15, I was in a music school. In my previous life, I was a musician. Now I only make noise. But I played piano. And I was pretty good because the school, during communism, the school would send you to competitions. And if you won competitions, the school got money from the government. That's how it worked. So they will send me, and I will win competitions, and the school would get so I feel pretty special, You walk around the city and you see Theodore, with the piano. I mean, I felt so good. Until they changed the principal of the school, and since during communism we had to go to school 6 days a week, Monday through Saturday, and I got free Sabbaths since first grade. And I was a pretty good student. I'll go to my neighbor, check what they did, and do all my homework. So I had all A's and stuff like that. Otherwise, my mom would kill me, so I had to. So when they changed the principal, she decided to make me go to school on Saturday, on Sabbath. So one day, I was 15 and a half, she calls me in the office, this new principal, and said, Ted, this Sabbath, you have to come to school. If you don't come, I'm going to expel you. Now, in my mind, I was like, man, this lady is pretty serious, but you lady cannot afford that. I'm the best. Okay? And I go home and I share this with my dad, and for the first time, because I expected my dad to say, listen, you no school, you come to church. My dad said, listen, you're 15, I want you to make a decision what you want to do with your life. I'm telling you, I don't remember the date, but I remember it was Tuesday, February. It was a Tuesday day in February, very cold day. And I didn't sleep the whole night. So we do get these moments, right, in life when you cannot forget them. So something similar happens to Miller because he's watching. His best friend died next to him, and somehow God saved his life. And he's like, whoa, he needs to make a decision. Anyway, I did get kicked out of school, but that's another story. But that's the only time I kind of was so disappointed with God, But that's for the next sermon. So, Miller is looking at reevaluating his life. And there's this Battle of Plattsburgh when they're surrounded. by the English army. Now, the English army was much stronger. They had better weaponry. I mean, everything better. There were more people. And Miller writes to his wife. If you read some of his letters, you know, we have his Facebook. They're in Aurora College or University now near Chicago. If you read some of these letters, you're going to cry because basically he's saying final goodbye to his wife. He says, we are surrounded, and I think that we are going to die in the next few days. But his army makes a trick on the English, you know, there's the short version, and his small army wins. And Miller is like, that's not logical. Remember, he's a logical mind. He says, that's not logical. This cannot happen. There must be. And with time, that's how God's Spirit works. With time, he begins to think about faith, about what his mom taught him, and he goes back and becomes a Christian. He experienced a reconversion experience now. But being a logical man, he says, listen, all these deists, what they were telling me about the Bible, I need to find the logic. I need to, really see that the scriptures is true. So he is not only going back to Christianity, but he wants now to be personally convinced that this is true. It's not enough to listen to the pastor, You check it out for yourself. You need to be personally convinced. And so Miller begins. And I want you to see the years. How long is that? He begins systematic Bible study. He describes it verse by verse. Reading the Bible is not a sprint. It's a marathon. Okay? Just don't, Bible is not, I finished reading the Bible, so what? What did you remember? See? So Miller began, look at the years. You will see the next slide. And when he begins and reaches the book of Daniel in about 2 years, he is so shocked by this verse, unto 2,300 days the sanctuary will be cleansed. And for Miller, at that time, they understood the sanctuary to be this earth. Okay, so they got it a bit wrong. But Miller is so shocked, like, whoa, wait. And then he goes and reads history, and he discovers that Jesus, according to his calculations, would come very soon. He says in about 25 years, or about 1843, 1844. And Miller is like, wow, this cannot be. Because most Christians thought that Christ, we're going to have 1,000 years of wonderful, And Miller is so excited. And so he does, by the way, this is look what he does. In 2 years, he is reading through the Bible, only with the Bible in crude and condensing, and makes the conclusion. But then, because he is a logical mind, he says, well, I don't know if this is true. Let me go back. And he goes back, and now, how many years? Much longer. Do you see that? Oh, sorry. Do you see that? 5 years now. He is re-examining and looking at every objection. If you read his story, it's so fascinating because he said, even my people that disagreed with me didn't have all the questions that I had in my mind. And he's like, I think it's true. And then he goes a third time, but this time it's longer. Do you see that? And he becomes convinced. I think he said that God's prophecy is true. And as he studies, he has this conviction inside that now, since you know that, you better share it with others. I'll give you this is a short version, but the whole thing is very, very exciting. And he is reluctant to go because by that time he's about late 40s, early 50s. And he said, I'm very shy person. I don't like to talk to people. I'm a farmer, God. But he has this thing, okay? He's scared, and he makes a covenant with God. He said, Lord, you know that I'm not gifted. I'm not going to go to preach. But if someone comes and invites me, then I will do it. And he said, I went to bed so relaxed because nobody's going to invite Father Miller. Well, be careful what you tell God. In about half an hour, on his door is his nephew. And, here's the quote. If I should have an invitation to speak publicly, I'll go and tell them what I found in the Bible. Instantly, all my burdens was gone, and I rejoiced that I should not probably be thus called upon, for I had never had such an invitation, okay? And so in a 30 minutes, he says, his nephew said, Father Miller, my father sent me, our pastor is not available this Sabbath, and we know that you began to study the Bible for many years. Could you come and share what you've studied? And Miller said, he writes that, I was so upset with myself because he promised to God that. So this shy person goes and for the first time he shares what he has studied, Daniel and the soon return of Jesus. More invitations followed, and because the message was so powerful, and I told you the context, people are interested in that, and they're discovering these new things in prophecy. So by the end of 1830s, you have people that are now attracted to that. Jesus is coming soon. Oh, and Miller was very logical. I mean, if you study your Bible for 15, 16 years, you're going to be good. Right? The problem is we don't study our Bibles. And our doctrines, I told you, are very biblical. So Miller was convincing. So a lot of people began to be attracted to what Miller had to say. This is, Pastor James, you can get a tour of your church and go actually and travel. The Miller farm, including his house, belonged to the Seventh-day Adventist Church. We bought the whole place. And you can have a wonderful Sabbath there. They'll give you the church that Miller worshipped. I mean, I've been twice, and it's very powerful. But that's his house, and he did all his studies here. That was kind of his study room. This is the yard. This is his desk. We even have his Bible, original Bible. His bed. That's the Bible that he studied. And we have his glasses, but I forgot to take I even have a photo of myself with his glasses. So Miller, that's how Adventism started. I'm going now to cover a few people that got converted, that are important. And I want to begin with this gentleman, Joshua V. Himes, and look what I call him. What is the engine doing to the car? Moving it. So imagine Miller, Father Miller is the car, but he has no engine because that's his nature. And Himes was like, I think Bulgarian probably heritage. He was like, man, you have such a message, we have to do something about it. So that's Himes. He met Miller. In fact, he invited Miller to speak to his place, not because he believed in the second coming, but because Miller would bring a lot of people. So he wanted to enlarge his congregation. So it was all, another thought. But us, because Himes was more dynamic as a preacher, so he said, man, this old guy, he's only standing like this. I mean, but he was bringing people. So, but as Himes listened to Miller, he was convinced that this is true. And Himes said, listen, now look at the year. What is the year? Until 1844, 5 years. And Himes is like, Brother Miller, we have no time. We have to put this message out. People need to hear about it. And Himes is the reason why Millerism became so famous. You read any history book, it's there. Because of Himes, not because of Miller. Look what he did. He established a Facebook, a web page. TikTok or whatever you call it. Because 19th century publishing was very important. I'm so sorry that I didn't think but to bring you some original things to see, but that now, actually it's better that I didn't bring them, so you can come to Loma Linda, to the Heritage Research Center, and I can give you a tour. You're gonna see some fascinating stuff, okay? The early Facebook, Adventist Facebook. But he began publishing. This was very, very important because that's how they kind of promoted their message. And you will see that James White will follow the same thing when we come to Adventism, okay? So he began Signs of the Times, Midnight Cry. They began to publish books. Secondly, he began to organize conferences. They called them general conferences. Okay? You see where we got a lot of things? There's nothing new, Solomon says, under the sun. And the purpose of these conferences were to study the second coming. In other words, they get together, they had a study, and a lot of people would come. And you will see they built the largest tent, evangelistic tent, the Millerites, because of Himes. They organized camp meetings, they used them for evangelism, and they did worldwide evangelism. Do you know how they did the worldwide evangelism? They would go to New York to the port, and they will put a lot of the printings, a lot of the periodicals on the ships that went around the globe. So that's how they did a lot of evangelism. Okay? So, this is a photo of the Midnight Cry. This one is from June 27, 1844. And we have original copies. We even have original copies from October 1844. And you can see the gap when they expected Jesus. There are 2 weeks when they didn't publish anything. All right? So, and they began in, I think, in October 31st. Again, they began to publish. So, but that's, we have very good copies, very well-preserved copies. These are some of the books that they published, the Millerites. And as I said, they didn't have Google or anything. That was the best way to do it. This is the tent, just a drawing. But when they asked the tent maker to make this huge tent, the guy said, "You are crazy, nobody will come," because it was hosted for 6,000-7,000 people. He said, this is, but they did fill it out, and so forth. So Joshua Himes, very important figure, and you can do some studies on it. Josiah Leach, he became the first converted minister to Millerism, and I list him because he became the managing editor. Everything that you see published, he kind of ran it because it was a huge ministry. He grew up with a huge ministry. And then you have Charles Fitch, who is famous for, first that he died just 8 days before the disappointment. I have read his obituary, and it finishes like this, I'm paraphrasing. Sister Fitch is going around happy as never before because she's going to see her husband in 8 days. Okay? Talk about the belief that they had. So, and he's also famous for a sermon that he preached in 1843, "Come out of her, my people." This is for the first time that this gentleman began to consider Babylon any Christian that denies the soon return of Jesus. Okay? And he invited people to come out of their churches and so forth. By the way, Millerism, I didn't mention that since we're just doing a highlights, but Millerism was not, it was an interdenominational movement. People were not asked to leave their churches, but just to accept the second coming. So I may be a Baptist and he may be Methodist, but we'll get together on these conferences, right, and just share our belief. But later on, they started kicking them out of the churches. So that's what happened even with the White family, okay? So Charles Fitch, for the first time, he began to ask people, hey, you have to leave that churches because they don't believe in the second coming. So that's why he's famous for. And here are some other interesting fellows that are connected to Adventism: Joseph Bates, James White, William Foy, and so forth, okay? Now, of course, Miller, I want you to remember this. William Miller never set a date for the second coming, okay? So that's a test question for the test. William Miller never set a date. If you read his writings, he always said about, if there are not mistakes in my calculations. In fact, William Miller believed that Christ would come because, he had friends. So his friends would go to him and says, come on, you know a little bit more. Tell us when. And Miller said, the Bible says we don't know. About. He says, come on, tell us. So I said, okay, if I'm not mistaken, I think that Christ would come March 21, 1843 to March 21, 1844. Now, he started March because of the Jewish calendar, okay? And again, he said, if there are no mistakes. So that's how far he went to setting a date. But he never set a particular date. It was another fellow that did that. You will see on the next slide. And so when March 21, 1844 came, this period passed, there was I call it a little disappointment, okay? And that's how life is. We have little disappointments, we have great disappointments. But the great disappointment came because of this guy. It's easy to remember, three times S. S, Samuel S. Snow, okay? Samuel Snow, after the initial kind of little disappointment, Samuel Snow in one of the camp meetings came with this. He related Leviticus 16, and I don't have time to go into that, but the Day of Atonement. What happened on the Day of Atonement, in the Old Testament? What did the priest do on the Day of Atonement? Went to the Most Holy. Once a year, the priest went there, It was the cleansing of the sins. It all was symbolic, representing that Christ will take away our sins, throw it in the ocean. That is gospel. That's why the sanctuary, it's a very gospel-oriented doctrine, And so he read it and says, listen. This happened on the 10th month, the 7th month, the 10th day, 7th month, October. So Samuel Snow is preaching that, and the story is like this. It's even more interesting because our Joseph Bates was preaching something about, Jesus. And they went to him and said, Brother Bates, can you give the pulpit to Snow because he has something more important to tell us? So Bates kind of, sat down. But they were in a camp meeting and they were going for days. So Samuel Snow came with this message and said, well, we expected him to come in the spring, but he's coming in the autumn. That's the short version, okay? And so there was a great enthusiasm. Now, we read this as a history, okay? You read it? But I want to show you a few quotes because quotations are very powerful to set the concept. I want you to see the excitement and then the disappointment. When are you greatly disappointed? Not disappointed, but greatly disappointed. When? Exactly, when you're greatly excited. Yes, sir? In 2014, I have to tell you this, it's a soccer ministry. Liverpool, my team, there were 3 games left. We needed 1 point to win the championship in England, okay? After 30 years. And I was so happy. I was like telling my wife, just prepare a good meal. We're going to celebrate because there are 3 games left. There's no way we cannot be champions. Great expectation, right? We lost all of the 3 games. I was greatly disappointed. If I had money, I would throw my TV outside of the house, you know. But you see, they're expecting Jesus, and they're absolutely sure. And for us, it's like history. For them, it was that's why the bitter disappointment. I want you to see that. Look at this. And that's why I like quotations. You know, that's from them. This is, look, the Great Expectation now. October 3, from Facebook. I take up my pen with feelings such as never before experienced. Beyond a doubt in my mind, the 10th day of the 7th month, October 22, will witness the revelation of the Lord Jesus Christ in the clouds of heaven. We are then within a few days of that event. Awful moment for those who are not prepared, but glorious to those who are ready. I feel that I am making the last appeal that I shall ever make through the press, writes the preacher Strauss, you see. This is William Miller. Look the date. October 12th. I mean, that's 10 days. Now, Miller, I have to make the context. Miller was very skeptical about it until 10 days before that. When he saw people so much excited, he said, I thought it was of God, you know. So Miller said, Dear Brother Himes, I see a glory in the 7th month, which I never saw before. Thank the Lord, O my soul. Let Brother Snow, Brother Storrs, and others be blessed for their instrumentality in opening my eyes. I am almost home. Do you see the excitement? Liverpool, glory, glory, glory. My brother, I thank God for this light. My soul is so full I cannot write. My doubts and fears and darkness are all gone. I see that we are yet right. God's word is true. And my soul is full of joy. My heart is full of gratitude to God. Oh, how I wish I could shout. But I will shout when the King of Kings comes. You see the excitement. All right? And October came. And Liverpool didn't win the championship. See the... And now you see the pain. Because there was a great for us it's history, for them was life. Painful. And I'm sorry when people laugh at the Millerites, you know, and all these Adventists, and for them was a real thing. Painful. Josiah Leach writes 2 days after, it is cloudy and dark day here. The sheep are scattered, the believers, right? And the Lord has not yet come. I want to hear from you very much. If Brother Himes is with you, I want him to write and let me know what he thinks of doing if time continues after a week from the Sabbath. Disillusionment. Hiram Edson, he became a Seventh-day Adventist. Our expectations, he writes, were raised high. And thus we look for the coming of the Lord until the clock tolled 12 at midnight. So can you imagine? They're expecting him in the morning, he's not coming. Lunchtime, evening. See? The day had then passed and our disappointment became a certainty. Our fondest hopes and expectations were blasted. And such a spirit of weeping came over us as I never experienced before. It seems that the loss of all earthly friends could have been no comparison. We wept and wept till the day dawned. Do you see that? Great expectation, great disappointment. And when you read those things, you understand better what was going on. James White, when Elder Himes visited Portland, Maine a few days after the passing of the time and stated that the brethren should prepare for another cold winter, my feelings were almost uncontrollable. I left the place of the meeting and wept like a child.
And they sold like their homes and everything they owned too. Like they didn't have anything, right?
Yeah. A lot of people sold their businesses, they sold their homes, Yeah, and there's a whole movie about it, yeah. But you see how, I mean, the great expectation, and suddenly everything collapses. On the top of that, if you read some of the periodicals, they started mocking them through the main periodicals. They call them like a cats that now are going to sleep and not, and stuff like that. I mean, very, very ugly, ugly things, okay? So they experienced the disappointment. Now, this is a rock behind the Miller's farm, okay? A lot of people thought that Miller was waiting for Jesus there. We have no historical evidence for that. It's possible, but this is just a folk, okay? Adventist story. It's not true. But it's there, and it's really open. It could have been true. We don't know. But I'm just saying that we have no historical evidence. But we went and had a Sabbath worship in the Miller's church, and we had a communion, so that's where we washed our feet, and it was a very powerful experience, just to sing songs and have there and sing. Just to kind of, this is the little church of Miller that he continued to be part of until, his death. That's inside of the church. And you see, at the time appointed, the end shall be. And I want to finish this story with how Miller responded to disappointments. Okay? There's a whole sermon here, Pastor. Okay? Miller wrote December 5, so a few weeks after that, he wrote to people and he posted his letter on Facebook, Midnight Cry. He wrote, "I have been waiting and looking for the blessed hope, and in his expectation of realizing the glorious things which God has spoken of Zion. Yes, and although I have been twice disappointed, I am not yet cast down or discouraged. God has been with me in spirit and has comforted me. Brethren, hold fast. Let no man take your crown. I have fixed my mind upon another time, and here I mean to stand until God gives me more light. And this is today, and today, until He comes." I don't know if you realize, by the way, the capital letters are in the letter. I don't know if you realize the significance of that. But let's say that some of you get the gift of prophecy and say, "Pastor, I know Christ is coming 2027. Okay? How do you know that you're going to survive until 2027? You may go out after this meeting. I may go out, get hit by a car, and today is my day. You understand? We have no hold of time. It's only God that holds time. That's why date setting and all this stuff, it may be exciting, but Jesus is very clear, nobody knows. Why? Because we don't hold time. God gives us time. So that's so profound. Miller says today, and today, that's where I expect Jesus until He comes. See, it's very, very profound. Anyway, I can go on and on, but we have to finish. So Miller dies with this hope. 1849, he passes and dies with the hope that Jesus is coming soon. And I believe that, one day God will resurrect him. And the beautiful thing about death, although I'm first to admit that I'm very scared, as I told you, I'm scared from everything. So even if I have a little tick like this, I go to a doctor, and my wife is like, "You're so scared about your life." Of course I am. It's only one life. But I believe that when God comes and, Miller will resurrect you, it will be like a sleep, right? You go and you sleep 12 hours, and it's like, "Oh man, I just went to bed." That's why our doctrine of death it's so powerful, because the Bible says it's like a sleep. You don't feel anything. You see, it's very powerful how God created the brain. And you're like, "What? I slept 15 hours? I don't believe this." You see, so the same thing. So God will resurrect Miller, and He's going to see Jesus. What were the consequences? A lot of Millerites lost their faith in God, including Ellen White's twin sister, Lizzie. They were so disappointed. A lot of people lost their. Millerism fragmented into several groups. I combined them into 3 groups because the first group, spiritualizers, there were many. People went and did some crazy stuff, okay? They thought that Jesus came spiritually in their hearts. There was a whole group, the most funny one. It's the one that said, we need to become like little children. And so they started, grown-up men dressed as little kids and crawling on their... that's how they thought they were witnessing. Anyway, but 3 main groups, remember that. The main group is the Albany Adventists. They exist until today. They're called the Advent Christians. When I went to read some of the Millerite letters in Aurora University, I met with, I think it was the principal of the university or the library, I don't recall, and we had lunch together, and once she understood that I'm a Seventh-day Adventist, she's like, man, I'm so jealous of you Seventh-day Adventists. I said, why? Because she said, we have no mission, we are dying. So that group at that time was about 150,000, I don't know, probably. They have no mission. And she was really like, you guys have mission, you're growing and you are the smallest. But we are cousins with them, you see. So, we are going to concentrate now on this one, the Sabbatarian Adventists, the smallest group. So how we began as Sabbatarians. So we go from Millerism now, we concentrate and we go to the Sabbath keepers. Now, notice I don't call them Seventh-day Adventists yet. There's no Seventh-day Adventists until 1863. When I started my PhD, I wrote my first paper for George Knight. And I wrote about, it was something for, in the 1850s. Okay? And I write, Seventh-day Adventists, Seventh-day Adventists. So I got the paper all with red marks. There's no Seventh-day Adventists in 1850s, so, They're Sabbath-keeping Adventists, but not Seventh-day Adventists. These are the founders of the movement, and you have it in your list. Joseph Bates, the first picture, and then you have James and Ellen White, okay? Those 3 people contributed greatly to the organization of this small group to grow and so forth. So just a little things about Joseph Bates. Do you want to have 5 minutes break? Let's have 5 minutes break, okay? So now it's 3 o'clock, 3:05. I begin 3:05. Just stand up, get water, and then we'll go with that, okay? Just to relax a little bit. Get the water, stand up, do some exercise. Okay. Can you hear me now? All right. So, I'm going to give you a little bit about each one, and for Joseph Bates, there's one thing I want you to remember. Joseph Bates is related to bringing the Sabbath message to this small Sabbath-keeping group. Okay, so when you hear Joseph Bates, I mean, you may know that he was a sea captain and he used to drink and smoke and blah, blah, blah. By the way, he's the first Seventh-day Adventist health reformer. He became vegetarian even before he became Millerite. I mean, you see? So, but one thing that I want you to remember, he is known for his introduction to the Sabbath group. And I'm going to tell you a little bit the story in a little bit. James White, of course, he's the husband of Ellen White. He was, I use the same word, the engine. He was Joshua V. Himes within the Sabbath-keeping movement. He was I don't think there would have been a Seventh-day Adventist church if it was not for James White. And he was work alcoholic. He almost died. I mean, he had 2-3, heart attacks because he didn't take care of his health. But he was the engine, and of course, husband of James White. I have always wondered, what does it mean? I mean, how do you feel being a husband of a prophet? Must have been very interesting. But that's the family, James White. They had 4 sons. 2 of their sons passed away. And Henry passed away when he was 16, the oldest, from some kind of pneumonia. I can relate to that because I almost died when I was 5 from asthma. My parents didn't know that I was developing an asthma with very strong pneumonia. By the time, and I remember that, by the time they took me to the emergency room, I was like this, I couldn't breathe. And the doctor put 2 injections, and the doctor said to my father, what do you do? I mean, you're killing your son. So my father collapsed. So the doctor was wondering who to save, me or my father. So I always joke with my father, I'm glad the doctor saved me, but you survived too, so it's good. But their son, these are real people. They went through a lot. And their 4th son, John Herbert, died when he was 3 months old, so as a baby. So Ellen White knows what it is to suffer, and some kind of a skin infections. But those are the two boys. The big one, this is Edson White. We can have a whole seminar on him. I'm writing a book about Edson White, so it's coming in 3, 4, 5 years, if Jesus doesn't come. Fascinating figure, because he was the disobedient boy. It's like my brother in my family, And I was the good one. I'm just joking. But he was the disobedient. He left the church. In fact, Ellen White said, I almost would she wrote one letter to him and said, I'm ready to give up my prophetic ministry because of you. Wow. Very powerful letter, And anyway, he came back after 30 years he came back to the church and became the first missionary in the South to the black people. So it's a fascinating figure. And of course, you have the good guy. You always need to have good guys like my brother, okay? Make sure tell him that. Willie White, who helped his mom and so forth. So, but that's the family. And of course, the 3rd founder, you have Ellen White. You know about her. I'll skip things. She had this prophetic, visions. I've written a whole book, so you can read it. You can get it through ABC or Amazon, Accepting Ellen White. I was always fascinated. How did people believe that she is a true prophet? Because there's a lot of controversy. And it's very interesting. I made it like a story. But in the 19th century, there are a lot of people that professed or had some kind of similar visionary, claims. So it's not like today I come to you and say, sister, I have a message from you from God. You'll send me to ER, right? I mean, pastor, go check yourself. I mean, that's how we are. Not in the 19th century. In the 19th century, they'll say, wow, tell me about it so I can compare it to Scripture. You see, a different way of thinking. But anyway, that's the thing. This is Ellen White standing, and she had a twin sister, Lizzie, that I told you and she appealed to her. I mean, you read some of her letters, you're going to cry. How she appealed to her sister to come back to God, and she never did. So she died without accepting Jesus. She wrote books and a lot of things, about religion, education, but of course she's best known for health and education. That's her main contributions to Adventism. And if you have seen in 2015 the Smithsonian, Institute, they listed the 100 most influential people of the United States history, and Ellen White is listed there, especially in terms of health and education. So it's it's there in the public square. We haven't done a good job to promote her, but I think we should, because she is there, regardless if you believe in her, visionary claims or not. And I always recommend to people the book Steps to Christ. Even I have students now that have no clue about Adventism, but they're so fascinated because I asked them to read Ministry of Healing. And for 11 years I have done that, and I continue to do it, and they get fascinated. These are non-Adventists. Just like, whoa, give me some more from this author. Yes, Steps to Christ. And it's a very, very good book. If you haven't read it, you need to read it. Okay, so these are the founders, and they were trying to find their identity, and little bit I touched this morning on that. They had, for 2 years, what they called Sabbath conferences. And they had real discussions there, something like our Sabbath school. They will get together and they will discuss different things. So Joseph Bates would come and present the Sabbath, and they'll ask him questions. And then, so Ellen White describes one of these conferences. She said, we were 34 people, and we had 1,000 opinions. Okay? But that's how faith comes. You discuss, you want to know. And they were very sincere. Once you're sincere, it's okay to ask questions, right? And so they had these Sabbath conferences and unified upon the doctrines that I mentioned today. The second coming, they continue to believe that Jesus is coming soon. Okay? They said, well, but if Jesus is coming soon, then what happened on October 22? You see, it's a different now question. Because there were some people that rejected God and rejected October 22 and so forth. They said, no, that's correct. But what happened? And so that's how we came to the sanctuary when they did a study, these three people, and I don't want to go into the whole story, but they met together, they studied, and they discovered that Jesus went from the holy to the most holy place. It's like in the Old Testament, Jesus figuratively, everything is figurative, right? God is cleansing us. We are entering the last days of human history. God cleanses us and says, listen, these are my people, and they are sinless because of his blood. You see? So these people, Hiram Edson, Crozier, and Hahn, they developed that and explained the doctrine of the sanctuary. I will skip that. This is the barn where they studied. It also belonged to the Adventist church. So you can see the barn, and they recreated it, when they, how they sat together and studied and so forth. But that's Hiram Edson and so forth. The Sabbath, I told you, came through Joseph Bates. It's a very interesting story because Joseph Bates learned about the Sabbath from a Seventh-day Baptist. Have you met a Seventh-day Baptist? They have a church in Riverside. Yeah. So, there are not too many, but he met. That's how I learned through Rachel Oakes. And let me say, I think I have. That's the picture. This lady visited a church. It's called the Washington Church. Today is the Seventh-day Adventist Church. This is the first Adventist church, Sabbath-keeping church. So Rachel Oak visited Frederick Wheeler, and I think that I have a photo of him, this pastor, because her daughter was going to this church. And the pastor said, listen, today we're going to have a communion. And he preached a sermon on the commandments of God. And he said at the end, if you don't keep the commandments of God, you are not allowed to take communion. So after the service, this little lady goes to the pastor and said, Pastor, I was so tempted to stand up and to say, you are not allowed to take the communion because you don't keep the the fourth commandment. And she gives him a Bible study after the church service. Frederick Wheeler goes home, and for 1 week he studies, and next Sabbath he calls all the members, says, we need to worship the Sabbath. She is right. And that's how they began to keep the Sabbath. And Joseph Bates hears about this. And he walks more than 20 miles in the snow to learn about the Sabbath. How many of us would do this today? Come on. It rains. Oh, I don't want to go to church. Plus, they have it online. You know what I mean? Because we try to find a lot of, defects. These people, no. How many of you going to walk 20 miles in the snow? And we're talking snow. To learn about the Sabbath. And he goes there and he hears this story. This is the church. Today, as I said, it's a Seventh-day Adventist church. Do you see here, there's a little stone right here? They have a trail for about 2 miles. Every single verse in the Bible, from Genesis to Revelation, that speaks about the Sabbath. And it's a beautiful thing because you have flowers in the spring, and you have some what do you call these, brooks, right? Little brooks and so forth. I mean, it's beautiful, but you can read all the verses about the Sabbath. So it belongs. It's in Washington, New Hampshire. Yeah, in Washington, New Hampshire. If you go on a tour, they're kind of the same area, and you can visit all of those. And we had Sabbath here as well, No. New Hampshire. It's in the east part. Adventism started in the east, okay? This, I just made a photo. 2 years ago, we finally bought Joseph Bates' house. That's his original house. And we are remodeling it. This is the church. We're remodeling the house to be like a historical place like William Miller's house. They got so excited that even the mayor of the little town, right, wants to bring other people to tour the house of Joseph Bates. So we're going to do a lot of witnessing there. And the city is building a huge parking lot because we cannot afford that to have buses to come there. So this is going to become a fascinating place. And I have been with the person who is responsible for that because we have Joseph Bates' little bag that he traveled with and his Bible at Loma Linda. So I'm going to.
When is it opening, open to the public?
At the moment, it's still not open. They think that by the fall of this year, it will open to the public. Because they're remodeling the whole thing, okay? As it used to be during the time of. So anyway, it's an exciting venture, but that's the house that we got from finally, that was something. Yes?
Is Bates' home also New Hampshire?
Fairhaven, yes. Yeah. So, state of the death. General Christian belief, most people believe that people die and there's a soul that goes to heaven. Now, by the way, it comes, I don't want to give you a theological study, but it comes from the Greek philosophy. It's not biblical, you know that, okay? It comes from the Greek philosophy when they believe that the spirit is good, the body is bad. We believe that it's holistic. God gave life and it's, the whole thing. Anyway, but they accepted that even before the great disappointment, which is very logical. Why would Jesus come if I'm already in heaven? I mean, that doesn't make sense. But I discovered something. I'm sorry I'm taking too much time, but when I was pastoring in Dallas, and I did evangelistic meetings, most people had issue with this doctrine, not with the Sabbath, but with the state of the dead. And I am so shocked about it. Exactly. They cannot imagine that their grandmother or mother or father or kid is not in heaven. They have a lot of difficulties to accept, what we have to offer in terms of that. So anyway, but that's a go. And of course, the gift of prophecy that Ellen White had. Okay, so by the 1850s, Sabbath keepers had good theological package. This is of course, we believe that we are saved by God and all the other things. Okay, but those are kind of the unique things. And they had message. So once you have a message, what do? You want to share it with others. And that's what they began to do. And that's what led, once you begin to share it, you begin to grow. And so they started to grow and had to organize. So we come now to the 1860s when we organize as a church. So you get the picture. 1840s, the Great Disappointment, we come out of it. In 1850s, the group that begins to study the Bible, they come with a theological package. 1860s, we organize now. Now, there were some Sabbath-keeping Adventists that didn't want to organize. If you go to the Facebook, to Review and Herald, you will see there is a war between them. Because they thought that the moment you organize, you become Babylon. That was their thinking, okay? But there were but there was a need to organize because of the growth. Okay. You see the statistics here. 1850s, there were about 200 Sabbath keepers, believers. Look what happens in 2 years. Because now they had a message that made sense. And they continued to grow. So, because of the growth, they had to do something, and this led them to organize. Of course, they did a lot of evangelism through Facebook, as I told you. These are the periodicals, the Review and Herald, some of the other periodicals, Youth Instructor, the Health Reformer that started, Signs of the Times, and so forth. So, and those are photos of that. I should have brought the originals, but you need to come to the center to see we have great copies of that, okay? And so forth. So they had a conference in 1860 when James White and Ellen White really pushed for us, hey, we need to organize in order to be more effective. And everything was related to mission. We have to organize not because we want to be, we want to do mission better. And if you're disorganized, what happens? Even in the church, right? Nothing works. So they had to organize, and they chose a name in 1860, but still some people were discussing, shall we organize and so forth. So it took them until, initially they wanted the name the Church of God. But there was another Church of God. Yeah, and already taken. So they said, oh, why not? And they liked that name. And we organized officially on May 20th, 1863, as we established ourselves in Battle Creek, about 3,500 members, 30 ministers, and the president was to be James White. That's what we read in the minutes. But because he pushed people to organize so much, he said, no, I don't want people to think that I want to be the president. So he kind of stepped down of that, and they chose John Byington, who was an educator. He became the first president of the General Conference, okay? So that's what I want you to know. If somebody talks to you about 1860s, we organized as a denomination. We became officially organized. This is a replica of the church. If you go to Battle Creek, this is a replica. We don't have the church, but us, because we have pictures of it, they try to replicate it and make it. And inside, you have these benches that are very hard, so you cannot fall asleep, okay? So Pastor James, you better change these things here, all right? And of course, they had the commandments of God there and all of it. So, but if you go to Battle Creek, we also have a lot of the things there as well, okay? So that's 1960s. Now, after we organized, we began to look at another question. How do you live your faith? Okay, this is what you believe, but how do you live it out? So we began to discuss some lifestyle issues. For example, you know that the Civil War started in the early 1860s in this country, right? So they organized, and immediately there was a draft. So what do you do? Should we send people? You see, I mean, it came naturally they had to make decisions. How do you live now your faith? Well, you don't kill, so do you send people and so forth? So should Adventists participate in a war or bear arms? And again, if you go on Facebook, there is an argument. Yes, no. Some people went so far and said, listen, we need to eradicate this sin of slavery, so let's make a Seventh-day Adventist battalions, army. Have our own army. We are capable of doing that. We're Adventists. I'm not joking. That's whole articles about it. And then there are some people who said, no, we should not go. We are pacifists. We should be So it was going back and forth. At the end, they came to a position, kind of the middle of the road position, which I think is very wise. Non-combatant service. In other words, you may participate, but not in, killing people, but in some other ways, like Desmond Doss. There's a whole movie about it. Okay? So they came in the middle because there was not really a biblical position. And at the end of the day, look at this. The issue was ultimately left to the conscience of the individual. So that's what, and still it is our position today. We, at the end, you decide what you want to do, but the church encourages the official position is not combatant service. But you see how they started discussing things, and it became part of our identity because they needed to do this. Another one issue is the health. Now, I do a whole quarter, okay? So you need now 6 months on this slide. Because early Adventists were not interested in health, believe it or not. You know why? Come on, you can get it. Jesus is coming soon. Who cares what you eat? So because of their belief, they said, this is not part of our mission. In fact, James White argued with some that began to say, but look in the Bible. He said, no, this will distract us from our main mission to tell people about the second coming. So that is how. But gradually, of course, it changed. And, of course, Ellen White had a huge role to play. And even at Smithsonian Magazine, that's her role. Because it was God, through Ellen White, that said, listen, we need to make changes. Because early Adventists were dying from not keeping or taking care of their health. And the first message that God gave to Ellen White was basically to James White. And there were principles that we got, but God really gave it to James White. Because he was dying, trying to save the world. And God said, no. I give you life, you need to, take care, and anyway, I can preach on that. So, very simple messages. Health is important, and then health became part of the mission of the church. So, we are not talking to people only about the beautiful heaven. You see, we are now trying to help people here and now, which is very good. That's what Jesus did. Teaching, but also healing. In fact, in Ministry of Healing, Ellen White says that Jesus did more healing than teaching. You see? So we are very much in line. We're not talking about beautiful heaven, Jesus is coming. What about now? You see, so you help people now. So it's a good thing that we developed. Those originals, the original vision, 1863, on the left side, And 1865, on the right side, what God revealed to Ellen White. So those are the original manuscripts. I'm sorry I'm rushing, but I need to finish. And if you look at this, I'm not going to read it because of time, but very often we think that health is what you eat, isn't it? I went to my chiropractor. After I moved to California, I went to a chiropractor, and I introduced myself, and he said, "Oh, you're new here, and where do you work?" I said, "Loma Linda," and the guy immediately knew. He said, "You're Seventh-day Adventist?" I said, "Yes." And he said, "So you don't eat pork?" I mean, that's what he knew about it. And I said, "Well, that's true, but also there's a lot of other things, so we are friends today." But that's what people think. But if you see what God reveals to Ellen White, look at this. We have a duty to come out against intemperance of every kind. And then she lists working, eating, studying. I mean, it's a whole lifestyle. That's why we talk about holistic life. You may be a vegetarian, but I have seen vegetarians that eat so much sugar that you better eat a piece of pork. You know what I mean? So, I mean, it's a holistic thing, right? Even I tell my students, you may eat very healthy, but people have discovered 21st century, the new cancer, it's sitting. We don't move. Have you noticed? And here in the United States, you even have your mail, like with the car, you open it. You see? So we need to, it's a holistic thing. I mean, that's my point. Anyway, and then 1865, Ellen White says that the health message is part of our mission. So we also teach people how to live good. And this is all for our benefit. God wants us to be healthy and happy. Even if you have a little flu, how do you feel in the morning? Miserable, isn't it? Only with flu. I mean, and God says, "No, I want you to be happy. And you keep my laws." I mean, I promise you that. So, and we have a lot of data today that Adventists, live, 7 to 11 years longer and so forth. So we began a Facebook, Health Reformer, a periodical. We established health institutions, and we began to train people to become health missionaries, medical missionaries. So, I mean, that's a huge part of Adventism and our identity. This is a copy of the Health Reformer. We have a very good copies. The first one came in August of 1866. This is John Harvey Kellogg, who played a huge role for the development of Adventist health, And even today you go to a supermarket, you have the Kellogg's cornflakes, developed together with his brother, although John Harvey Kellogg was not interested too much in money, so his brother said, "Okay, I'll take the money. I mean, you just..." Adventism has a contribution to that. So this is our first health institute, and look, once Kellogg began to deal with the health in Adventism, he rebuilt it. It became a huge sanitarium, and inside was beautiful. He imported things from Europe, from Italy, marble, from the Czech Republic, some wood and stuff like that. It's very beautiful. And you can see, by the way, in the morning, everyone had to get up and do exercise. Even if you were in a wheelchair, they had a place where you could stay and do exercises. And we have recording of Kellogg. There's some valse music, and he's counting 1, 2, 3, 4, so everybody does exercise. Today, if you go to Battle Creek, that's how it looks like. And they can give you a tour and tell you the Adventist story. It was written by my previous boss, who just retired a year ago, but he kind of gave the whole description, and they give you an Adventist tour. And it's fascinating building. It's beautiful inside. Even in the kitchen, when you go to take lunch, which we did with my wife, they have these water fountains with music because Kellogg wanted even when you eat to enjoy it and relax, okay? So it's amazing place, and so forth. And another issue was, of course, education. What I want you to remember about this is, again, a holistic thing. For Adventists, education was not only intellectual knowledge, okay? It has to do with the development of the whole person, emotionally and also spiritually. At Loma Linda, where I teach, we teach doctors, but they have to take a class on spirituality, on religion, religious class. Okay? Why? Because we value. And a lot of people today, there's research that shows that education has to do with the whole person. In fact, we had people from University of Chicago coming to us to see how we do it, how we teach doctors or medical professionals religion, because they see the value of that. So, and again, it came from through God, through Ellen White, by God, that we had to do this, that education, it's called mental, physical, spiritual. And we opened our first school during that time, 1874. Today it's Andrews University. That's the building, the first building that we bought. So by the 1880s, we have our belief, we have our organization, we kind of try to figure out some lifestyle, right? How you live your faith. And it was time for a crisis because everything was going so good, but we live in a sinful world. So in 1880s, we were faced with the first theological crisis, and I covered that today a little bit in my sermon, with this group that, they started fighting how is one saved, and Ellen White played a critical role to balance Adventism, all right? And if you see how Adventism is described, Revelation chapter 14, it's both keeping the commandments and the faith of Jesus. So, but that was a huge crisis which I described today in the sermon. These two groups that emphasize different things and so forth. Okay, so I'll skip that. I read you, I think, this one this morning. So the true significance of this crisis was that Ellen White tried to bring Adventism back to this balanced message. Okay. You have the patience of the saints, you have the faith of Jesus, the commandments of God, and the faith of Jesus. So all things together. You cannot exclude them. People try to, well, if you're saved by Jesus, would you go and purposefully disregard his commandments? You see, you wouldn't do that. If I love you, I will, I had a habit to put my socks like this in the middle of the room. So after I married my wife, she didn't like that. So if I love her, do you think that I do it today?
It's the faith of Jesus.
Yeah. So, it's all together, coming together. So the first crisis really helped Adventism to be more balanced. And Ellen White did a lot of promotion of that message, saying, hey, listen, we need the balance. We lost the balance. And she played a huge role, and I told you her books and so forth. Together with Johnson Wagner, they took a campaign to take this message to the people. There was another crisis after the 1880s. It has to do with organization, because you see, by the beginning of the 20th century, we became an intercontinental church. Okay? We had people, world church, we had people everywhere, on many places. So what do? The original structure that we had was not sufficient. So by the beginning of the 20th century, we had to make changes and do reorganization. And again, look the purpose, to better serve the mission of the church. It's not that we are big and look at us. No, to do a better mission. And this is at that time that we established departments, unions, just to localize, to make people work better in their own places, instead of everything being run from Battle Creek. And so A.G. Daniels and Ellen White were very significant. By the way, A.G. Daniels is the longest service president in the Adventist Church, I think 22 years. But he played a huge role together with Ellen White to develop this new structure, which we still have today. Okay? General conference, then you have divisions. We have 13 divisions in Adventism. Union conferences, local conferences, like we belong to the, which conference here? Southeast, right? California conference. And it really helped the church to work better and do better mission. I mean, if we don't do mission, I mean, we have better close our doors, you see, and so forth. And the third crisis was what I call the Kellogg's crisis, because Battle Creek, this building burned 1902. And Kellogg wanted to rebuild what you saw. He did it by himself. But Ellen White and the leadership wanted not to spend money on one building, but to build smaller places around the country, because again of mission, you see? And once there was a disagreement, Kellogg left the church, not because he did not believe in in the Sabbath or Ellen White, because of personal struggles. And that was his baby, he couldn't do it. And so that brought a crisis. And there was another crisis. So you see, there are a lot of things that came in the beginning of the 20th century. Another crisis had to do with the issue of revelation and inspiration, and it happened after Ellen White passed away in 1915. What to do with her writings? Okay? How do you read them? How do you interpret them? And Adventism by that time always believed in a thought inspiration. What is thought inspiration? God inspires your thoughts, and then you use your own words, right? God does not dictate. You understand? But you describe what God revealed to you through your own words and so forth. Now, we always supported that, but by that time in the United States, there's a huge movement. How can I call it? Like the liberal movement, which rejected the Bible. And as a reaction, there came a movement called fundamentalists that said, no, the Bible can be trusted because it is the written word of God, word by word. Okay? And so Adventism was kind of into that context, dealing with Ellen White, when we believe in thought inspiration. You see the issue. And so we kind of, we had to establish again that thing that we believe in thought inspiration. God inspires the thought, but the prophet uses their own words. Okay, it's not a verbal inspiration and so forth. So anyway, it's a huge thing. It's a whole seminar on this issue. And since then, the church has become really a global movement. After this crisis, dealing with that, after restructuring, we have really grown and become a global movement. For example, I didn't mention that when I talk about health, but do you know that we have the largest health system in the world among Protestants? Only the Catholics have a larger one, but among Protestants we have the largest. We are the most spread denomination around the globe because of that restructure. So we are really a global movement, and it all started after that crisis. I want to mention here something, and then I'll give you 10 minutes for questions, but you see the first name, Michael Tchaikovsky. We always consider that our kind of official missionary movement started with Jan Andrews. Even we have the Andrews University after our first missionary. Yes, but he was our first official missionary. We have Michael Tchaikovsky, look a little bit earlier, who went to Europe. Well, his story is like this really quickly. He became a Seventh-day Adventist from the Catholic. He was a Catholic and became a Seventh-day Adventist. 6-7 months after he accepted the message, he went to the leadership and said, I want to go to Europe and share Seventh-day Adventism. And they said, brother, you're still not prepared to do that. Because they knew he's a Catholic, you see. So they didn't send him. Then he went to the Christian Adventists, to the Miller's group, the one that I told you about. Said, can you sponsor me? I want to be a missionary in Europe. They said, sure. He goes there with the money of the Christian Adventists, but he is preaching the Seventh-day Adventist message. So he tricked everyone. By the time J.N. Andrews goes there, this brother, Tchaikovsky, has established more than 200 congregations. He went to to Romania, started churches there, and from Romania they came to Bulgaria. So because of him, we said, so when J.N. Andrews goes, because I always wondered, how did J.N. Andrews go there? He knows Adventists. What happened? Because of this guy, Tchaikovsky. So finally, 2 years ago, I found a picture of him. We didn't have a picture, and they donated a book. And in the book, we had his image in the book. So that's Michael Tchaikovsky, the first unofficial missionary, okay? And of course, we have J.N. Andrews, who went as the church sent him there. But look, the membership began to grow. We became a global movement. And today we have, I think, 21.8. We may have passed 22 million, okay? I don't know. I haven't checked the latest. But we have the largest educational and medical Protestant system in the world. And this is how the growth happened. Look at this. Do you see the line? Just after the beginning of the 20th century, a sharp growth in Adventist missions around the world. Look at this. Membership. For the first time, in 1921, you have membership that is great outside of North America. Okay? But 1920, and look what happens in 1930, 10 years later. Do you see the membership outside North America? Look what happens 1950. It's doubled. You see that? So we're really a global movement. We passed the 20 million mark in 2016. The 20 million mark, and today I said we are about 22 million, something like that. I have to check the statistics, and here some other statistics of membership and so forth. Look, we have 22,876 churches and 72,000 companies. All right? So, we see from a small group that started arguing, 20, 30 people, what God does, because we were ready to change and move and do mission. And unless we do mission, as I told you, we better close the doors. Over 100 colleges, and you can see the statistics, okay? So that's what Adventism is all about. So there are many things to celebrate. But there are also challenges that the church faces. One of the things that I have noticed lately is the issue of Trinity, okay? And there are some people, they want to go back to the early Adventist roots, and they argue that, they question Trinity, let me put it this way. So I had a brother in my office arguing about it. I said, you want to go back to Adventism? Good. So go and buy a piece of pork, because early Adventists ate pork too. And they loved it. And I have a quote from Ellen White to prove it. Okay? It's a simplistic thinking. That's what I'm saying. But that's an issue that is coming. Lifestyle issue, ordination, And we can spend a whole seminar on that. Organizational issues, is it time to reorganize? There are so many things because we're a global movement. And yet God works with us. And we need to love each other no matter, what you accept in these issues. And sometimes, I mean, we are a complicated community. That's what I'm saying. So don't blame the leaders all the time because it's very, I mean, I've done it 102 times. But it's not easy. We're a global church. You go to Bulgaria, I mean, if they see how you do your service, they'll think that you're going to hell because you had a guitar. You know what I mean? I'm exaggerating a little bit, but we have to consider that we are a worldwide movement and be more understanding to each other and treat each other with love. So let me finish with this because I like to finish on a positive note, okay? We should not forget our history because, I mean, I was not even able to go through my slides through all the points. You see what I mean? Every single point, I can take 10 minutes to tell you about it. But I hope that you will get excited and go back and study history because Adventist history will teach you why you believe what you believe and give you confidence who you are. As you said, my brother, right? You know your roots. And no roots, what happens to a tree without roots? You're gone. There comes a storm, gone. You see, so let's don't forget our history, but also let's look to the future. And it has to do with mission. You are here in Hemet with particular purpose. Okay? You're not only another church. I mean, there are many churches here, so why do you exist? Unless you want to tell people the possibilities that God gives of living good life and having hope for the future. See, it's a great message. Commandments of God, having good life, and expecting Jesus. I mean, this is a great, great message that we have. And I think that we have so many possibilities to tell people. I mean, we can teach them about health. People are dying to understand how to, especially now, after COVID and that. I mean, we are missing so many opportunities. I talk to my students. I mean, sometimes I tell them about rest. You know, I had a Baptist girl, not this quarter, the previous quarter in my class. After one, I mean, I kind of teach them history of Adventist health, but I put these elements about Sabbath. She came to me and said, Professor, I think that I'm going to observe the Sabbath. There's logic about it. So you see, we have possibilities. And so, of course, there's always challenges. I mean, I don't want to be, okay, we're so blind. I mean, no, we have challenges, but let's not focus on them, but let's see what God can do through challenges. And I have a new theory, Pastor, and my theory is this. It's always good to have tension, because if there is no tension, we'll fall asleep. But if there is tension, is Liverpool gonna win or not, you know? We stay alive. We look, and we try to, you know, through God's Spirit to be alive and do what we have to do. So tension is good. So we don't ignore the challenges, but we focus on the mission, what God can do through that. And let's remember that, after all, God is in control. He just uses us, sinful beings, for his mission. If we don't do it, he says that he's going to call angels or he's going to talk through the stones. But he wants us to be excited because once you do mission for God, you're going to experience things that you've never experienced before. When I was a student at Andrews, I got so busy with writing my dissertation, I had no time for mission. So they called me from the General Conference. They needed a translator in Bulgarian because they were doing 39 evangelistic campaigns in Bulgaria. And I said, I'm so busy. But then I decided to go. I still cannot explain to you what a recharging time I had, just seeing people being converted to God. It recharged me, you see. And so God is in control, but he likes to use us because he wants us to get excited and get, the fun as well. Otherwise, he's going to have fun with his angels. He's having fun anyway. But you say, hey, Lee, sister, brother, we want you to have fun. And so let's remember that, he uses us. It's the same with Ellen White. Can you imagine a lady that got hit by a stone, couldn't hold a pen, suffered so much, and at the end God used her to give a health message that it's so tremendously powerful educational system, and her writing speaks to us today? If God can use Ellen White, He can use us. But you must be willing. So God is in control, and we need to give ourselves to Him. And so I like to finish how I begin. We have nothing to fear for the future unless we forget to look back. And may this be your experience and my experience. So I have the PowerPoints for you. I'm sorry that I couldn't cover everything. But I teach, this is like, 10, 12 weeks that we try to cover in 2 hours. Any questions? Or 2, 3 questions, and then we finish. I know you're tired. If you have no questions, that's fine too.
Weren't there 2 other men called before Ellen White?
Yes. There were 2 men called before Ellen White, and they both kind of not rejected, but they were scared.
Right.
Now, I used to blame them until I read early writings by Ellen White, because she was almost ready to give it up too. She said, when God revealed to me what I must do as His instrument, she called her messenger of God, she said, I preferred to die than to do what God asks me to do. So the same with these 2 people, right? They didn't, they were scared, so to say, and they say no to God. Sorry?
Tell me who they were and why were they scared?
So, William Foy was
Go ahead.
William Foy was one of them. They were scared because of the message. Can you imagine you go to your sister and say, listen, I saw you last night that you were sleeping with your neighbor, and God wants you to repent, and you say it in front of everybody. You see? So it was never easy to be a messenger of God. You remember Moses? What was his reaction? John the Baptist. What was his reaction? You see, so it's never easy. I have, because we believe that God may call another prophet. We never know, right? And we believe in perpetuity of spiritual gifts, including the gift of prophecy. And I've told to God, I'm so scared of everything. Please, I don't want to be called to be a prophet. I'm saying no right now. You see? And so that's why. The main reason was because of the burden that you had to carry, and the things that God revealed that you have to do. It involved a lot of traveling, a lot of sacrifices. Ellen White would leave her kids with the neighbor. Yeah. I just wrote a paper about the first offshoot of Adventism, and it relates to your question, came in early 1850s, 1853, 1854. They began to publish a paper called The Messenger of Truth. This is before we organized as a church. We have an offshoot. The offshoot came because 2 pastors, Adventist preachers, that took care of people in Iowa, got upset with Ellen White and what she told them. And they had to go there and, try to, but people divided. So it was never easy to be God's prophet. I mean, that's the main reason. Very good question, yes. One more and we finish. Yes?
The Trinity.
Uh-huh.
In their Sabbath school lesson last quarter, they called it the triune. Now, what is the big deal with the Trinity? I mean, it's the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. So why are we so afraid of that? Why are we so afraid of the Trinity?
Uh-huh. Good question. All right. It will demand the whole seminar. So, the short answer is this. The Trinity doctrine, believing in, God in three persons, came from the Catholic Church. Now, people don't realize Catholic means universal. There was no other church at that time. There was no other church. Those were the Christian church. Okay? So that's the first issue. The second issue is that early Adventists, including Joseph Bates and James White, did not believe in the Trinity doctrine to a certain point because they came from a group called the Connectionists, okay? Or they called them Christians or Connectionists or whatever. And that group did not believe in that. So the whole movement of going back and really be like the early Adventists, like the apostles, worship God in spirit and truth, that has brought some Adventists to have questions about it because it came from the Catholics and it's not really part of our tradition. But if you go like that, I mean, as I said, you have to accept all the other things that they did. And there's a process of growth, and people need to realize we call it the present truth because there's always a development. And you saw it. I mean, I hope you saw how we grew in understanding and so forth. So God always, that is the main concern. Yeah. But I hope that through discussion and people realize, that there's nothing. I mean, you have, like in Genesis 1, if you read the original, you see the union of the three gods. You have the Spirit, you have everything there, right? And anyway, that's the main issue. Yes.
So you gave us a bigger picture when it comes to the message is concerned to not to forget the past, not to forget the future, and how God is in control. Taking what you have presented this afternoon and also this morning, is there just a short, appeal or message that you can give to us, local church, like Hemet Seventh Adventist Church?
Oh, I can give you a lot of messages. I'm Bulgarian, so no. Look, as I read Adventist history, one word appears over and over again. Their main concern was mission. I hope you got that because I repeated it. If this church stops doing mission, and I know that you do, I learned during the lunchtime that you guys do community service and stuff like that. If you stop doing mission, you better close the doors and let's not waste our time. Now, when I say mission, people think that you have to do evangelism. No. You can be a missionary on your street where you live. Amen. Where I lived, I had a neighbor, they just moved last year, but Bob, my neighbor on the right side, he understood that I'm pastor. He has a gift to connect with people. Everybody on my street knows that I'm a pastor. So sometimes he will come to my door, Pastor, we need to go and pray for that lady because her husband had a heart attack. So we go. You see what I mean? That's mission. Sometimes mission goes without words or saying anything about Adventism, you see? But I believe that if we don't forget to do that in a local level, we will be, this church you will need 2 services, believe me. How it happens, God, I told you, through the Holy Spirit, because we're only messengers. But it will happen. Now, when do you do mission, however? Yeah, but when you have to be excited about something. Why now you know, oh, this crazy Bulgarian, he's a Liverpool fan. Do you see why? It's inside. You cannot hide it. My wife's like, every time you say about it, to people, of course, you need to know. I have a student, he's Manchester United, so he almost stoned me. But we beat them last week 7-0, so I go to class like this, But you see, once you're excited, it's like in Jerusalem, they told Peter and John, and you guys better shut up and don't talk about Jesus. And Peter told them, we cannot, it comes. We cannot help it, exactly, you see? So once we that's why, if you're excited about Adventism, what you do? You tell people. You think we don't eat pork? You think we are strange? Let me tell you, there's logic about this. And people know, you see. Now, we are so concerned what they will say or will they accept. Leave that to God. You're only speaking it, and it's God's Spirit that transforms them. If God decides to bring someone here, He will do it. It may be not their time. You see? But that's my always kind of pitch on a local level, because we want to convert the world. Well, forget it. Jesus has a plan. He's going to do it. You do it here. And once you begin to, and people see that you're excited, they get excited too. You see? And that's why I like Adventist history. I didn't tell you this, but even before you took my class, when I went to Andrews, I applied to do Old Testament in my application, and that's how I got accepted. So I go to Andrews and I take class by George Knight about the development of Adventist doctrines. And I'm sitting there like, whoa, man, I don't know this stuff. Because during communism, I didn't know anything about history. So I went to him after 2-3 weeks and I said, listen, George, I want to change my application. I want to do Adventist history. And since then, I'm so excited because it's a really exciting thing. It's part of life. But once you get excited and you share it with people, I'm telling you, you're going to excite others, you see, including our younger generation and so forth. So I think that it's very appropriate that we do this, that we get excited. But in order to get excited, you have to have something to get excited about. Okay? And if you want to watch Liverpool, you're welcome to my house tomorrow at 4 o'clock. You see what I mean? That's what Jesus wants from us. And once we do this, He's in control. He can use us, and you're going to sit down and say, wow, I said that I can do nothing from God. My brother planted a church in Dallas, Texas. He started with 6 people. I will never do this, but he's crazy. He's crazier than me, okay? I was like, you plant a church from nothing? Yeah. Why don't you get a church? No, I want a church from nothing. So he tells me the story this. If you go to his church, well, he moved now, but if you go, he went to plant another church because he's double crazy. So if you go to his church, and you're new for the first time, you're going to receive a loaf of, it's not a bread, but what is it, like a banana bread with a special note and verse. Because once he preached and he said, God can use everybody. And this gentleman went to him and said, Pastor, I have no gifts. I'm really shy. I cannot teach Sabbath school. What can I do? And my brother said, but aren't you a chief? He's a cook, right? He said, yeah, but so why don't you use your gift? So the guy came with an idea. Everybody knew that comes to the church, he's going to get a banana bread with a verse. See, God can use anybody. It's just a matter of us to be willing to be used. And once you do this, you're going to get excited and, come with different things, and God will help you. And you're going to bring people that you'll be like, whoa, your kids, your neighbors, your friends. I mean, it's going to be amazing. My wife has a good tradition. I mean, like every Christmas we use the time, so she bakes a special Bulgarian, well, you don't know what banitsa is, but it's a heavenly food, okay? It's a pastry with feta cheese, okay? And once you eat it, you feel like in heaven, so that's why. But she makes that, and we give to our neighbors with a little cart, and I mean, we try to make connections and so forth. So we haven't baptized any of our neighbors, but we don't know what may happen in a year or two or next month, you see. And once we are willing God to use us, it can be a tremendous experience. And in heaven, we're going to hear stories that, hey, you remember me? Oh, you see. So let's try to do that. And I believe that knowing Adventist history, that's what you see. These people were excited. These people were excited to learn, to share. And as my sister said, I mean, we didn't go to that, but they sold everything, like the early Christians. Because they really believe that. I mean, we don't have to sell and do that stuff, but you see, if we're excited, we can do a lot of good things for the local community, for Hemet, and the results will be, believe me, tremendous, because we have a God. I mean, Ellen White says, God has 1,000 ways to do things of which we know nothing. 1,000 ways? And I worry. I mean, see? So that's my kind of appeal for the church. God bless you. Let's pray. Father God, we are grateful for bringing us into this community of faith, Seventh-day Adventism. It's an exciting journey, and we are in this journey together. And Lord, I pray for this church. I pray for the pastor, for the leadership, for the members, that through knowing Adventist history, they'll get excited even more to be light for you in the community, in the neighborhood, so that many more people can see how good it is to follow you, to be at your house. And Lord, I pray that you will bless their work here, and you will bring many more people that will be saved as a result of this church. Thank you for giving us life, for giving us the truth, for giving us Jesus, and keep us safe throughout this new week. We pray in your name. Amen. God bless you. Thank you.
Let's give Dr. Levterov a round of applause, along with his lovely wife and their son. They have been so awesome, and thank you so much for speaking life to each and every one of our hearts, and also speaking life into our church. God is indeed doing amazing things, and just the way this whole Adventist Heritage Sabbath came about, it was all God.
Yes.
And it actually happened because of the Master Guide training that happened just less than a year ago, thanks to Cindy Cox. And we have some Master Guides in the house, and also we have from Victorville, we have the coordinator, area coordinator, the Master Guide, who's here with us supporting. But not only that, I thank the Lord for Cindy to have the vision to say, we just don't want the blessing to just be amongst the Master Guide trainees, but to make this a whole church-wide thing. And so we want to thank you for spending the Sabbath afternoon, not taking a nap, but being here to take part in a wonderful message. And this was more than just a history lesson, but every single slide and every single presentation had message that we can take home and we can continue to cogitate as we get excited. As if I could have that much excitement, about my team or about the message that we preach here, and if all of us get on board with that kind of a spirit, we can win the whole entire valley. Amen. So just want to thank all of you for being here this afternoon. Also want to thank the viewers online and those who will be watching later on. Want to recognize Tim and Jolene Bearden. If you could just wave back there. Yes. I was back there, and Tim was literally operating the sound, the computer, the camera, the slides, and everything. And then we just want to thank Larry for being here to work the other camera as well to help get this message out. So thank you both for being just a wonderful assistants, right hand and left hand person of Cindy. And Cindy, if you can wave to everyone, thank you so much for all that you do. God bless you. And do you have all right. And especially those that would like, who came from out of town or from other church, please sign so that we can send out the slides from Dr. Levterov. All right. Okay, and then yes, and if there's anyone that needs Dr. Levterov's signature, he's here to sign off as well as far as your requirements are concerned. God bless you, and I hope that you'll have a wonderful rest of the weekend.